Somewhere in our flight training, fairly early on in the process, we're going to get into stalls. Power on stalls and power off stalls. And let me give you a little bit of peace of mind. It's perfectly okay if that sort of gives you the heebie-jeebies. I mean, you are sitting there in an aircraft with a flight instructor and you've been learning to fly, do ground reference maneuvers, things that you expect are going to lead to a solo, and suddenly your instructor wants you to make the airplane stop flying while you're still in the air. That's a little weird, but it actually is important. And one of the reasons we want to get into stalls is if you understand what they are and why they happen, it'll be much easier for you to do them and, most importantly, recover from them. Because the reason we do the stall is to demonstrate we can recover from the stall. In real life, the only time we ever want to stall is when we're landing and just above the ground. So let's look at the stall, what it is, how it works, how you recover from it, and why we would do this at all. Let's use this super cool P-40 as an example of our airplane. And by the way, if you get to train in something this awesome, you're way ahead of me. So P-40, one of my favorite airplanes of all time, really cool, but the wing is not that much different than the wing you're flying in whatever your training aircraft is. As we take off and we pitch up, we're going to get lift, and we're going to get lift because air is following over the top surface of that wing and it's impacting on the bottom. In order to understand the stall, we have to understand lift, and it's not just one thing. It's actually a few different components. There's going to be wind going under the wing and air going over the wing, that relative wind as we move forward. Air going faster over the top of the wing has lower pressure than the air going under the wing, so we have some lift. There's also the impact pressure because we're at a positive pitch attitude. There's air hitting the bottom of the wing, which helps create lift. You can demonstrate this yourself driving down the highway and you put your flat hand out the window and your hand is flat. It's not an airfoil shape, but if you just angle it upwards, the air wants to push it up. That's how it works. That angle of attack is going to give us a certain amount of lift or less lift, more or less, depending on if we have a higher or lower angle of attack. The stall is always going to occur when we exceed the critical angle of attack, when the relative wind is coming in directly, but we have exceeded that pitch up. Now the air can't flow smoothly over the top of that wing. It separates, it gets turbulent, it burbles. When that happens, we don't have enough lift, the nose drops, the aircraft is in a stall. That's what's going to happen. And if we understand that, we're a little less likely to get all heebie-jeebie, sweaty palm weird. It's okay if you do. It's normal in the beginning, but as you understand it and experience this and learn how to control it, because you are the pilot in command, you are controlling this, it gets a whole lot easier to do, a whole lot more comfortable to do, and you can actually recover from this with a great deal of confidence and precision. So if we understand lift and what creates lift, and we understand the stall in that exceeding the critical angle of attack causes the stall, we have a pretty good understanding of the first half of this. The second half is the recovery, and the great thing, it kind of does it itself if we don't screw it up. When it stalls, the nose will drop, which automatically lowers the angle of attack to below the critical angle of attack. The wing is flying again, so we just need to add power, bring it back to level, and then get our altitude back. Let's take a look at this based on the Private Pilot Airman Certification Standards. What is expected of us? What do we have to do? And how do we know if we did it well enough to pass the ride? The ACS stipulates that we will be in the landing configuration. So in your training airplane, which undoubtedly has fixed gear, most likely, not all, but usually. So what we're talking about is flaps out. We'll have the flaps at the setting they would be for a normal landing. As we're flying along, we get our flaps out. We'll establish a stable descent, what we would normally see. So we're pitching and trimming for the normal approach speed we would have when we're landing the airplane. This is a power off stall. We want to set ourselves up to simulate we're landing. Of course, we want to do this at an altitude high enough that we want to be able to recover before we hit 1,500 feet. That's kind of important. If you do a perfect job but recover at 1,200 feet, that may be an issue for your examiners. You want to start this high enough that you can certainly recover before you get to 1,500 feet. Plenty of room to recover should there be a problem. We're going to establish a descent, just like we're coming into land, and then we're going to round out at a specified place so that we increase our angle of attack. That means increased angle of attack, increased drag. The aircraft is going to want to slow down, and to maintain our altitude, we're going to have to keep pitching up, because as we slow down, we need a higher angle of attack to maintain that same level of lift, to maintain that altitude. Eventually, we're going to get to the part where it stalls. We want to recover from that stall using the technique that's in the Pilot's Operating Handbook or the Airplane Flight Manual. Pilot's Operating Handbook is a generic book for that type of airplane. Airplane Flight Manual is for that specific airplane. It'll have that N number in it. Very often in a training airplane, it's something like full power, level off, bring the flaps out in increments as you get to the appropriate speeds, and then pitch up to gain your altitude back. You can do that very quickly if you're really working at it, because remember, when we stall, the stall is broken automatically. What we want to avoid doing is yanking the nose back up and going into a secondary stall. So if we break that stall, bring ourselves back to level, power on, now we're gaining speed. Now we have the ability to go ahead and start getting our altitude back as our flaps come out, and we're good. We want to reestablish at either VX or VY our climb speed, depending on what the evaluator wants. And the evaluator could be your CFI or the designated pilot examiner or your check airman if you're on a stage check. Either way, it doesn't matter. They'll tell you that when we recover from this, we want to get back to 2,000 feet on a heading of 360. Just do that. Now, if you've never done this, you might be a little intimidated when you read the ACS and it says you need to be plus or minus 10 degrees on heading. If you're in a bank, that's 20 degrees plus or minus 10. You might be thinking, wow, that's a lot to remember. I don't know if I can really do this. The key is to look out the window, not at your instruments. Doing a stall is something you're going to feel, you're going to hear. There are several factors, and in the beginning, you're undoubtedly too nervous. I think everybody is. You won't notice the buffet, but there is one. You might notice the stall horn, because they can be pretty loud. Some aircraft in the old days, they just had a light. No, some of those are still out there. So whatever the indicators of a stall are, be aware of them and start paying attention to see them happening. Look out the window while you're doing that. You'll be able to pick an object in front of you, a building, a lake, a mountain, something that you can point at. And as long as you stay pointing at that object, you're going to be within 10 degrees, plus or minus. The recovery process, you can learn chair flying, just sitting in a chair like this. You can get through that procedure where I have the brake, I release the back pressure, full power, come back to level flight, flaps out in notches, bring back my altitude, establishing VX or VY. We can learn that right here in the chair without spending any money, without dealing with anybody. The more we understand this maneuver, the more comfortable we are with it. And frankly, stalls are probably the maneuver that give people the most pause when they start their flight training. Gives them a little bit of anxiety. They're not sure what to do. The airplane's dropping 100 feet, and it's really not doing that much. It's actually much more benign than you think, and you have lots of time to recover. As a matter of fact, most training airplanes, you can fully stall in a power-off configuration and just hold it there. That's something I used to do routinely with flight students way back in the old days, where we would just put it in what's called a falling leaf. So the airplane would stall and recover, and stall and recover, and stall and recover, all on its own. I would hold it there for a little while, showing the student that with the rudders, I have control over my heading. Because I'm holding it into a stall, I know what's happening. I'm coming down at about 500 feet a minute in a Cessna 152. It's really not that exciting. All I have to do is release the back pressure, full power, bring it back to level flight, bring the flaps out in increments, then climb back at VX or VY to the altitude I want. It's not that big a deal once you get to understand it. So if you understand lift, then you understand stalls. And if you can understand the stall, you can figure out the stall recovery using your POH or your aircraft flight manual. In either case, it's important that we can stall the aircraft when we want to, recover from the stall after that stall has occurred, and explain why that all happened. Because believe it or not, it's not just doing it that's in the ACS. It's also the knowledge section explaining why the stall occurs and how the recovery occurs. So I wish you the best of luck with this. Don't get all bunched up about it. It's okay to be nervous and admit it to your CFI. I'm uncomfortable doing this. Gain your experience and your understanding with your CFI. Really get a handle on it, and you may find that once you conquer stalls and have the confidence of understanding why it's happening and that you can control this, all of a sudden, flight training gets a whole lot more enjoyable. Please click like on this video, give us a comment if you would, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we just love having you along for the ride. I'll catch you next time.